over. So a lot of that leads to the fact that mobile usage is definitely growing. But one of the challenges is that now advertiser adoption hasn't really caught up to that usage yet, and there's somewhat of an imbalance there. This is a slide from Mary Meeker at one of her annual or semi-annual data dumps, most recently at the Wall Street Journal All Things D conference, where she pointed out that mobile usage as a share of overall media is 10% when compared with internet, TV, radio, and print. However, its advertising share across those media is only 1%. Now, this slide is usually used in the context of pointing out the positives and the opportunity here, in that the forces of equilibrium will compel that advertising dollar to catch up with the supply in the form of ad inventory represented by that 10%. And we certainly believe that's the case. But there's also an equally kind of negative way to look at this, in that that imbalance is now causing mobile ad rates to actually go down. The fact that we're seeing an imbalance between the supply, which is the ad inventory, and the demand, which is the ad dollar going after that. And that's actually good for advertisers, because there's a lot of undervalued inventory out there. But however, it's not as good because it's a challenge for publishers, for media companies, for app developers who are trying to monetize apps, because that kind of mitigates their monetization opportunity when we see those ad rates being a bit undervalued. More data from Kleiner Perkins to support that. Desktop eCPMs across the board are about 5x what they are on the mobile internet right now, and that varies by different categories. Similarly, if you look at some of the top kind of performers in terms of gaining mobile usage, Pandora, who we're going to hear from later, Tencent and Zynga. Zynga just announced yesterday at their big event that they're seeing 20 million active daily mobile users. Still, the average return per user that these companies are seeing, average revenue per user, is a lot greater on the desktop still than it is in mobile, despite mobile's sometimes higher performance. Another example is Facebook. We're hearing lots about how Facebook is trying to justify its IPO valuation with a kind of fluctuating stock price and dwindling market share. A lot of that has to do with the question marks around its mobile strategy. The fact that it's having a ramping up number of users that are accessing the service via mobile, to the tune of now about half of its almost billion global users. But what's happening there is, as you have more users flocking to a touch point that is under-monetized, your overall average revenue per user is logically going to be pulled down, and that's what's happening there. Facebook is doing a lot to contend that, and we're going to get into that in a bit. But another example is Google. We're going to hear from Google next. A similar story where the average usage, or the growing usage in mobile, something off here? Okay. The growing usage in mobile is actually making their overall volume of paid clicks go up. And that's a good thing. However, lower CPCs in mobile, when compared with the desktop, is making the CPC average across the board go down. And that lower CPC in mobile is again due to less advertiser demand, hence less bid pressure. So we're seeing lower CPCs in mobile, and that's, again, kind of serving to drag down that overall revenue opportunity. Now, here's kind of the bright spot, or the silver lining to everything I just mentioned. If you look at the proxy of desktop average revenue per user over the last couple decades, in 1995 it was about $9. Last year it was about $50. Now, it can be argued that mobile right now is actually in a stronger position than desktop was in 1995 due to its growth rate, due to its levels of engagement, and also, importantly, its potential to find premium sources of inventory. And one of those, which gets to my next theme here, is local. We believe local is going to be one of those sources of premium inventory to, quote-unquote, save mobile ads from some of those dwindling ad rates. As background, we put out a forecast. This is actually the same number that you saw on the first slide I showed in the totals, going from 1.7 to 7.7 billion. But this is a segmentation by location-based targeted advertising versus non-location-based targeted advertising. And the way that's defined is now somewhat broad. It will very much evolve over time, as mobile itself does. But right now the definition of that is campaigns that have a geo-targeted component or are localized in some way, sometimes being a call to action or geographic specific ad copy. So with that rather broad definition, we're seeing just under half of ad campaigns right now in mobile being location-based. But we see that growing to almost 2/3 by 2016. A couple different reasons for that. One, the usage. Again, skewing highly towards mobile local intent. Google, again, reports 40% of searches have that local intent. Two, advertiser evolution to kind of come around to that reality. To build campaigns from the ground up that are based on the mobile device's not only capability, but also taking to heart that user intent. And as, I guess, support of that, location-based ad targeting, Millennial Media, who we're going to hear from later, major ad network, has reported that of all the campaigns they see on their network, they've seen a 53% year-over-year increase in those that are geo-targeted. And then the third reason is premium ad rates. So location targeting's ability to add relevance and the performance, the resulting boosted performance that we're already seeing, is going to result in higher premiums to kind of contend some of those challenges I mentioned earlier. Here's one supporting point. This is a study that Opus Research did, where they actually ran an identical ad campaign for a hotel chain across 5 different mobile ad networks. Now, 2 of those are among the crop of companies that we look at a lot that are specializing in location-based targeted placement. XAD, LSN Mobile, they're actually both here today. Other companies in that batch I would consider to be Where Ads, Chitika, Verve Wireless, a few others like that. They're distinguished from these broader-based mobile ad networks like AdMob, JumpTap, and Millennial. Anyway, the result of this test was that the CPMs and CPCs seen from the location targeting that these companies were able to accomplish resulted in higher rates. Drilling down a little bit further, XAD, one of those networks, has reported that they're seeing click-through rates in both display and search that are a bit higher than industry averages. For example, the average click-through rate in search and mobile is about 5%. They were able to accomplish more than that by doing a lot of location targeting. But more important is my point, not just the click, but what came after the click. This is what we're calling secondary actions. Things such as phone calls or generating directions. They were able to achieve, among those clicks that were happening, 36% of them were resulting in secondary actions, most of which being phone calls, some directions, and then other things. But the point is that these are things that are very tangible. They get further down the funnel and are the types of things that have a clearer sense of ROI, especially for small businesses that want the phone to ring. They want to be able to be shown that people showed up at their location. And it really tells me that with the proper calls to action, with the proper targeting, these types of numbers can be achieved. And XAD is certainly proving that out, as are some of the other networks that I mentioned. A couple examples drilling down. Yelp has a great opportunity, and they're proving that out. Yelp is a good example of a company that has really brought a lot of their online brand equity, their usage, and their engagement to the mobile device. Their iPhone app is actually one of the top downloaded apps of all time in the App Store. Now, they tell me that 10% of their monthly traffic across the board is happening via mobile. However, that smaller percentage represents a disproportionately high 40% of their search traffic they're seeing across the board. So that really tells me mobile users on Yelp are a lot more engaged, and it really is a great opportunity when they do kind of flip that monetization switch, which they have not done yet. And it's not just the opportunity, but it's back to that kind of Facebook concept that it's really the imperative to do so, as more users are accessing the service from a place that is not monetized. Another supporting point, every second a phone call is generated or made or directions are generated to a merchant via the Yelp app. And again, those represent highly monetizable events, which we believe Yelp is going to start to monetize probably this year. OpenTable is another good example, driving some of those same tangible actions and doing so in a way that's very incremental to their kind of legacy desktop product. They've told me that they seat 15 million diners per year. That represents 600 million in restaurant checks. But more importantly is the fact that these reservations are taking on different patterns or different behaviors. Whereas on the desktop, the average duration between when a reservation is made and when it is for tends to be days. Whereas on the mobile device, it tends to be hours. I'm looking for a table now or tonight. And that really tells me that the user behavior in this case is very aligned with advertiser interest in certain categories where they might have perishable inventory or dynamic levels of inventory where they want to boost foot traffic. So it's a good example, I think, of a company that is monetizing, doing so because it's incremental to what they see on the desktop, not only incremental in a quantitative sense, but also qualitatively with different types of leads they're driving. So those are a few examples. I want to go a little bit deeper on monetization and other ways we think it's going to happen. I mentioned Yelp. Foursquare is another good example. We believe this year they're going to flip the switch on monetization for what they've been giving away so far for free, or at least an enhanced version of that, which is the ability for small businesses to manage loyalty programs and gain foot traffic through the social signals and the other kind of features of Foursquare where people are discovering things around them. Yellow Pages is another good example, and other kind of traditional media that have feet on the street and high touch points with small businesses. So far, they've been offering mobile, but not to the extent they can, will, and should when it comes to breaking out mobile as its own product. They've mostly had it kind of tacked on as a incentive to purchase into a bundle that might involve digital, it might involve print, but what that usually entails is a mobile landing page or traffic generation. Mobile landing pages, speaking of which, I think are going to be a major area of opportunity. We're going to be talking about that in a panel later on, both apps and landing pages. The point is that there is so much additional search, most of it's local, that's happening and landing on these pages. There is about a low single-digit percentage of websites out there, particularly among the small business universe, that are optimized for mobile screens. That's going to be a massive opportunity to help small businesses establish a presence, build landing pages, optimize them, and host them on an ongoing basis. And not just that, but drive traffic to them. We're going to see paid search. Google's already doing a lot there. Pay-per-call, big area of development. Matt Booth, my colleague, put out a paper just recently on pay-per-call. He's going to be running a session later that gets into a lot of these dynamics. And if you think about it, on the desktop, pay-per-call has been really trying to get off the ground for the past few years and has to some degree, but the opportunity is so much greater in mobile because not only all the search is happening there, but the fact that it is, at the end of the day, a device that makes phone calls. So it's a very kind of seamless experience. And you see companies that are really starting to tackle this. Telmetrics, Marchex, who are both here today. Google, who we're going to hear from next, is doing a lot with pay-per-call through paid search. They're another great example of mobile monetization. We're going to hear from them next, so I won't go into this slide. And again, Facebook. So Facebook is really going to be the wild card with mobile monetization. Again, all eyes are on Facebook, and especially around its mobile strategy as more users are flocking there. So it's forced to be very creative in ways that it's starting to monetize mobile. And I think it's doing just that. It's thinking in a very, as we say, mobile-first fashion in essentially inventing a new ad unit in the mobile-sponsored story, which is integrated right into the news feed rather than being a static banner. But more importantly, it's something that is very organically generated. For those of you unfamiliar with the sponsored story, it's essentially a wall post or a news feed item or a like from someone that is already organically happening. Businesses can pay to have that messaging or have those posts, if it happens to line up with their brand messaging, pay to have that amplified further. Facebook has actually reported that of all posts and newsfeed items, only about 16% of those get seen by any given person, and that's a function of the time decay of posts getting kind of pushed down the newsfeed, and then also the EdgeRank algorithm, which kind of governs who sees what. Businesses can pay to boost that 16% essentially in times when that messaging kind of fits what they're going for, whether it be a mention of their brand, a like of their brand, or within their category. And the sheer volume of conversations happening on Facebook and what it's bringing in with the Open Graph is making kind of a critical mass of these conversations happening to have it be monetizable. One proof point is that already we're seeing the eCPMs in the mobile news feed when compared to Facebook's desktop kind of benchmarks very much outshine them. The volume still isn't there, but the eCPMs, I think, are very supportive of what they're doing there. And one point here, just to close out on Facebook, is that this is going to be very worthwhile to watch what they do here. Based on Facebook's sheer size, its influence in the marketplace, it's going to really acclimate users and acclimate advertisers to mobile advertising and really steer the direction this goes in its kind of very early stages. The way that mobile advertising evolves, I think Facebook is going to have a big hand in this. So I think that watching what they're doing, the results of what they're doing, and the direction that's going is going to be very important for anyone that's interested in monetizing mobile in any way. So last, I mentioned mobile first in the way that Facebook is kind of generating mobile-sponsored stories. That general concept, I think, is going to be kind of a winning factor in mobile. I'm going to borrow a phrase from Surjit Chatterjee, who we're going to hear from next. He likes to say, the mobile device has eyes and ears. I love that because, thinking in those terms, the ears of the device are the audible input. I mentioned pay-per-call. There's also voice search that's really getting off the ground. The eyes of the device, things like augmented reality, things like barcode scanning, the whole showrooming concept, being able to scan an item in a retail environment, be able to have the transparency around what that item is, average prices, reviews, specs, the fact that the store down the street has the same thing for cheaper. Really great, rich moments to start to get in front of users who are at these very high intent stages of the funnel. And again, something that I think is going to be at the heart of what really turns mobile advertising around in terms of advertiser adoption and then also kind of premium inventory. And then mobile payments, which I haven't really dive too deep on right now, but we're going to have a few sessions on that later. Great opportunity to really close the loop on a mobile presence, mobile content delivery, and be able to see conversions happen, given that the hardware enables it and it's portable and it goes to the store with you. All of those things are just very kind of, obviously, just mobile-first concepts, and I think a good ways to think. One kind of great example that I've seen recently that kind of pulls all those concepts together that I just want to point out briefly is what Tesco Home Plus, the international grocer, has done in South Korea. What they've done is basically strung up two-dimensional grocery aisles in subway stations. How many people have seen this example yet? Okay, just a few. So this is very cool. They've hung up two-dimensional representations of grocery aisles in the subway, and you can walk up, you can scan the item you want, purchase it, and have it delivered to your home, sometimes before you even get home from that very commute. And the reason I love this is that it sheds some overhead costs such as personnel, real estate, inventory, in favor of something that is more of a real-time ordering system, just-in-time inventory, and really works towards a lot of operational efficiencies. It also serves users' needs. It's very aligned with what they want to do. They don't want to carry a bunch of items home with them on their commute, sometimes heavy liquid-based items. And then lastly, it simulates the interface that everyone's used to, which is a grocery aisle, and the shelves are always stocked. So I think it's a good example of bringing together a lot of these concepts and really just some of the spirit behind some of the ideas that are going to kind of win out going forward. And then lastly, the post-PC era. This is a term that Steve Jobs coined, and I think a lot of people mistakenly think that he's talking about cell phones, which in some ways he is, but really it's the evolution of all mobility, and that's going to involve things like wearable technologies, biometric technologies like the Microsoft Kinect that can sense body movements. As chipsets continue to improve and get smaller, and Moore's law marches on, we're going to see so much more kind of mobile technology that can do more than just kind of make phone calls and the things that we're used to. A lot of wearable technology. One example here is what Google has done with its Project Glass. A lot of you probably have seen this. It's a little future-looking and a little ahead of its time, but I commend Google in really kind of putting out a concept video to get the juices flowing, get people's kind of ideas moving for the kind of data sets that are going to be needed to pull all this together. And I think that, that's just another example of what this is going, or where this is going to go. The post-PC era is going to involve a lot of in-auto technology, more than just what we see in kind of cell phone technology. And I point that out as just kind of my last slide, to always be looking, 3 years down the road instead of what's coming. That's also meant to be my segue into our next presentation, which is Google.